Diary of a Man in Despair. Friedrich Reck. August 1939.
I have been at Janning's, on the Wolfgang See. His impressive estate now lies deep under a shadow, its owner's fears about a war. He is preoccupied with fear about what will happen to his art collection and his stocks and bonds, and about next year's supply of coal for the central heating of his house, and about whether there will be a sufficient variety of sausage for his dinner the coming year. As a performer, he is neither more nor less than a character actor of the first magnitude. As a man, he is a fat bourgeois whose fears about the coming world storm center about whether his siesta with fishing pole and cigar on the shores of the lake will be seriously disturbed. Jannings told me all kinds of things about the famous Berlin scandal involving Goebbels, who was supposed to have been found in tête-à-tête with the wife of the actor, Fröhlich, and soundly beaten by the latter. The truth is somewhat different, unfortunately. Since Jannings says he was an actual eyewitness, I will vouch for the truth of his version. It seems that Herr Fröhlich left a party in Jannings' company, and went to get his car to drive home. Fröhlich found his wife in the car, together with the Herr Minister, in, let us say, tête-à-tête. He did not challenge Herr Goebbels, but later slapped his wife several times and thanked his valet for helping him expose his adulterous wife. This is the true story. The man could not find the courage, quite, for any public action. But the popular version insists on a more gratifying ending to the story, and holds fast to its vision of the beaten cabinet minister. Suddenly, a song entitled I Want to Be Happy, Ich möchte einmal fröhlich sein, has become immensely popular. I have been spending the last few days of August on the Chiemsee with Herr von K., who was a cabinet member years ago, and who as a young man knew Bismarck. We talked about his experiences during the war, and about the first days of the war 25 years ago on the East Prussian border. Then, just before the declaration of war and on nights of a full moon, the patrols would trot back and forth at the edges of the fields, one man behind the other, carefully avoiding the heavy stalks of grain. Even after the war had begun, it was hard to get the peasant recruits to overcome their feelings and ride into the wheat fields ready for harvest. Images from a world so near in time, yet already become like a legend from the past. A Prussian dragoon plunges his lance into the body of a Russian during the first cavalry battle, knocking him from his horse. He cannot pull the lance out of the body. Suddenly, looking down at the Russian, he begins to cry bitterly. The Russian strokes his hand, telling him not to take it to heart, for Christ's sake. Another image, a little Jewish boy, condemned to death under martial law for aiding the enemy, is being led to execution and does not understand. He is handed an order on which the verdict is written, glances at it uncomprehendingly and asks, "Please, for what is the little paper?" Another, a little old Russian peasant who was wearing the uniform of the Russian army when captured told us that he and his comrades were quite ready to shoot when the range was 1,000 meters or more. You can't hit a thing. And even when the range had narrowed to 500 meters, they fired. At least, you can't see whether you've hit or not. But when the Germans had got to within 100 meters, all the Russians threw away their guns, and under no circumstances used them, because who, sir, would take on himself to sin at such close range? Then we talked about Bismarck, while Herr Hitler's heavily loaded military convoys rolled eastward on the Salzburg highway below. As a young man in the Foreign Service, K. was to give a lecture before the Chancellor. On Bismarck's desk was a plate containing a chunk of sausage, and from time to time, as the young men delivered their little speeches, the old glutton would cut himself a slice as thick as a thumb, cover it with a piece of butter again as thick, and bite into it, without troubling about bread. There is no doubt in my mind that the physical durability of a chief of state has a profound effect on the policies it follows. The rise and fall of Napoleon's empire is an example. And I would like to know what catastrophe would ensue if the chief eunuch now deciding the fate of Germany were ever to sit down to just one of these Bismarckian snacks. I would be a spiritual cripple if I attempted to deny Bismarck's real stature and emotional depth. But we are now reaping the harvest of the industrially overdeveloped Greater Prussia whose seeds he sowed. I am more than ever convinced that his work contains the fatal flaw of a great man's tragic misjudgment, and that it is this we have to thank for this government of industry-minded dolts, and for the fact that we are being overrun by the masses, who reproduce like rabbits, have no work to keep them occupied, and are therefore made all the more greedy for power. We are on the threshold of a second world war, in which again all of geography will be against the Germans, and which will derive from the Bismarckian state. And I am quite sure that such a war, declared by the eternal Prussian as it will be, is lost before the first shot is fired. We will not be able to talk about better days until we have before us the outlines of the coming catastrophe. This perspective we will have only when we are sitting atop the relatively small pile of rubble which will result from the relatively short war to come, a war which is inevitable, and which will break out soon. Already there is a touch of autumn about this crystal-clear day, the last day of peace. With the measured precision of stars, a span of oxen pulls the plow uphill and downhill over a field unchangeable, looking exactly as they did when they lowed over the cradle of Christ. The clean and entirely innocent landscape lies before me, open and peaceful, and solitary as the illustration in a book. And yet havoc is in the air. People here sense it and are deeply troubled. The farmers, and more especially the Bavarian farmers, are the only people left in Germany who still keep contact with their own inner being and basic sense of reality, despite the universal hysteria and the series of successful political robberies. The only enthusiasts in the village are the Hitler Youth rowdies who were trained in Rideau and have an idea that the war is going to be like the Austrian and Czech promenades militaires. The next morning, as I was on my way home, the blacksmith came out to tell me the news. The pygmies to whom Germany's fate is now linked have taken the leap, and at this very moment that power-drunk schizophrenic's voice is crackling out of every loudspeaker. I pressed the man's hand. For what will soon be 7 years, he has suffered and hated as I have. I have no doubt that immeasurable suffering is coming, and that it could not be avoided. But I also have no doubt about the thing that has sustained me for 6 years, and maintained me in the darkest hours of my life, the certainty that today the great monster signed his own death warrant. I have hated you in every hour that has gone by. I hate you so that I would happily give my life for your death, and happily go to my own doom if only I could witness yours, take you with me into the depths. When I let this hate free, I am almost overcome by it, but I cannot change this and do not really know how it could be otherwise. Let no one deprecate this, nor fool himself about the power of such hatred. Hate drives to reality. Hate is the father of action. The way out of our defiled and desecrated house is through the command to hate Satan. Only so will we earn the right to search in the darkness for the way of love.